Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit and welcome to a port report for Vanquish. Didn't think we'd see this on PC, did we? Well, it has finally arrived. A spate of older Platinum games have been heading in our direction. Port quality has been variable, but for the most part, serviceable. The recent port of Bayonetta was alright. It had some performance problems later on certain configurations. It would have been better if it had things like uncapped frame rate. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. It was baseline, serviceable, playable. Still better than all of the console versions. However, there was a very specific promise with Vanquish, and that was, let's make this the best version. Vanquish on console existed on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, and on both systems it had an unlocked frame rate, but neither system could hold up to 60. That meant the frame rate bounced between 30 and 60, which was not fun. It made aiming a pain in the arse and the game generally quite unpleasant to play. I didn't enjoy it as a direct result of that, and honestly, it was a third-person shooter involving analog stick aiming. Quite precise analog stick aiming at times. Nope, not my sort of thing. So bringing it to PC with mouse and keyboard support sounds like quite the idea. And they promise things like uncapped frame rate, more detail options, 4K support, all that sort of thing. The question is, what have they delivered here? Well, the answer is a hell of a lot, actually. What could very well be the best Platinum port on PC to date. That said, as to how responsible Platinum actually were for it, that's a different matter entirely. As it turns out, Little Stone Games were very much responsible for this. Sorry, I'm a little hoarse today. You might be wondering, well, who are they? Well, they were a development house that were responsible for the port of Valkyria Chronicles to PC, which goes somewhat unsung as a very, very good PC port of a console game. So giving it to them is a pretty good idea. And they have, for the most part, delivered, including on some features which you might not expect. So, as per the new style port reports, we're not going to talk a huge amount about performance, we're not going to do benchmarking or anything, I'll mention it briefly in-game. We're going to talk mostly about functionality and potential PC-related problems. So, head on over to System first, and you will find your options menu. A little annoying, just a tiny little bugbear here. The graphics options require you to scroll down one level. Yeah, literally unplayable. Really don't know why that is, but hey, there you go, never mind. So that's where you'll find the graphics options. I was a little confused initially, but let's have a look at what's here first. So, controller support. If you use Xbox 360, Xbox One pad, it's going to run natively, no problem at all. Keyboard and mouse support. So there's a bit of a debate on this as to whether or not you should play this game with a controller or a keyboard and mouse. I'm no Vanquish expert. This is a game that can be played at an extremely high level. Has an extremely high skill ceiling, is in fact designed for multiple playthroughs with score attack. However, I'm not at that level. But what I've played of it so far with the keyboard and mouse has for me been completely fine. So you've got full rebinds with redundancy as well. This redundancy also includes additional mouse buttons. However, for some reason they don't really display properly. So let's say I wanted to select weapon 1, do a secondary bind, select mouse 5. You've got this weird icon here. It does work, it just doesn't necessarily realize that it's mouse 5. Not a huge issue, but that may pop up in tutorials and prompts and confuse you a little bit. Just be aware of that. Otherwise, you can bind pretty much anything you would want here. There don't appear to be any shared keys as far as I can tell, so that's all good. The only issue that I would have, really, is I don't know how well keyboard's going to work for the QTEs. QTEs generally work better on a controller because you know where the buttons are. There's only a limited number of buttons they could select. They could very easily do something absolutely ridiculous with the keyboard QTEs. I have absolutely no idea. So just bear that in mind. Cross that bridge when you come to it. You can dynamically switch between controller and keyboard in-game. The in-game prompts will also change dynamically depending on what you're using, which is excellent. And you do have mouse sensitivity right here. From what I can tell, I haven't noticed any acceleration, so I think it's raw input. If it isn't, then I can't tell. I'm going to be honest. I was never too good at really determining that. Best way to do it is generally loop your mouse in a circle and see whether or not the speed is consistent. If it's not, there's probably some form of acceleration. Other way to do it would be float your mouse over certain objects, like, say, enemies. See whether or not the speed of the mouse decreases or increases when interacting with certain objects. If so, there's some mouse acceleration. I haven't noticed any up to this point, but you have separate rebindable sliders for normal mode, aiming mode, and zoom, which is quite lovely, and they work just great. I should point out as well, this entire menu is mouse-controlled, which is also awesome. There's a slight problem. When you change something, you usually have to click twice to get to the next option. If you don't, you can hover over something and it won't actually select. It's a very, very minor issue. Also, right-clicking will get you back to the previous menu, despite the fact that it doesn't actually say that. You don't need to use a keyboard for that. So, this is all pretty great. Nothing really missing there. Vibration on or off. Separate sliders. Would always prefer a little bit more than this. 0 to 10 is not brilliant, but it's serviceable. And of course, you can tweak further in the Windows mixer if you need it. Vertical and horizontal control. If you're one of those people, and yes, apparently you do exist, you've told me you exist, who uses inverted controls, you can do it here. Camera speed, this is for controller only, so you cannot change this if you don't have a controller plugged in. Score on or off subtitles, messages, and brightness levels. I did find the game just slightly washed out. Might be something to do with my settings on my monitor, I'm not sure. Alright, graphics, let's have a look at that. What do you got? So, separate input monitors, lovely. VRAM, memory usage right at the top. This is something that's been coming in quite recently on quite a few games. I very much appreciate this. It just means that you're informing the consumer and making sure that they're not making a mistake, jamming their performance for a reason that they can't immediately see. The more of this we get, the better, frankly. Graphics quality. Now, by default, the menus look a bit fuzzy, for whatever reason. You might say it's a little bit stylistic, I don't necessarily agree. Might be the font choice, again, I don't necessarily agree. It'll go up to 4K. For some reason, I can't select ultra-wide. Now, I don't have an ultra-wide monitor, but I keep an ultra-wide resolution in my custom resolution list, just to make sure. I believe it does have ultra-wide support, however, as a little caveat, for those who are not using 16:9, the game has black bars. It's just the way it was designed. However, there is an advanced launch option that you can select, an experimental one that will turn it off. Head on over to the Steam forum. The stickied thread that you can find over on the Vanquish forum has the devs explaining how to do that. It also has an experimental field of view option. For third-person shooters, field of view is generally not high priority, but seeing that there is great, and I tweaked mine just a little bit. They put a disclaimer saying that that might cause some graphical glitches. I haven't seen any so far, but the fact that they put that in there as an optional experimental option for people is excellent. So I'm very happy about that. Okay, AA. What you got? Edge and FX AA. So fuzzy AA and an edge-based AA that's not very demanding. I cranked it up to 8. I didn't notice a huge frame rate impact. The game actually runs really well on my system. That said, the AA doesn't look brilliant. I would like maybe a more precise, more demanding AA, especially bearing in mind this is quite an old game. Here's the thing. Most of the time you're moving pretty fast in this game. You're not going to be standing around to sniff the roses or rub your face on textures, even if you happen to be me. So AA is not going to be that noticeable. But again, I would have liked a more advanced option if possible. But it's nice that there are multiple options available. Or, of course, you can go for none if you wish. Use an injector. Use your graphics cards, forced AA, if you would like. Texture quality goes up to high. Even on high, it looks a little elderly, but it is an elderly game. So you can't necessarily expect them to go crazy on that. Anisotropic filtering all the way up to 16. Crank that thing. Shadow quality, SSAO quality. Yes, of course, you can turn that all the way off if you don't like your SSAO. HDR and LDR, don't really know what they mean in context. I don't believe this HDR is the modern form of HDR. Nor do I really know what LOD means in this context. A little more explanation would be nice. What I have noticed is that if you turn both of these off, the game loses some of its sort of film grain filter. Doesn't completely turn it off, but if you notice the game has a little bit too much film grain for your liking, turning these two options off will help reduce that. Motion blur. Well, this is going to be very much subjective stylistic. For video, I'd never have this on because it'll make the YouTube video look awful, but for a game this fast, you may want motion blur on. Entirely up to you. VSync defaults to off. Lovely. Refresh rate 144 Hz here. Don't know if it supports anything higher than that, but they did say in the trailer it was completely uncapped, so that's quite nice. And the game does run higher than this. Right now in the menu I'm at 250 frames. UI on and off and different UI layouts available as well. This is excellent. I really don't think there's any other way to look at it. Is there any graphics options that are missing? Not that I can see. I mean, the only thing that I can think of in terms of UI might be a color deficiency option. They don't have anything like that. As you notice, this game actually does use quite a lot of red and green, so those that are red-green color deficient may struggle a little bit, but that's a minor issue. It's worth pointing out regardless, though. I mean, overall, this is just fantastic. I'm really, really happy with it. I didn't expect it to be anywhere near that good, but they seem to have hit all the right notes. I want this Little Stone studio to port everything now, please. Don't let Platinum anywhere near it. Maybe let Platinum observe so they can learn, because let's be honest, they've been spotty on PC ports when they've been doing it themselves, but Little Stone know their stuff. Let's show you some gameplay. Talk a little bit about how it controls, any obvious issues. Let's dive right in. So there's a full-on tutorial. Recommend running it. Only thing I don't like about the tutorial is the dialogue's not skippable. That's the case with some cutscenes in this game, but not all. The load times are insanely fast. I mean, obviously I do run on a ridiculous PCIe SSD, so you bloody well expect it, but sometimes it doesn't matter. Load times in this game, it's on less than half a second. It's pretty ludicrous. Let's rock and roll. Here we go. Frame rate is, right now, what I'd call absolutely rock solid. I'm currently capturing, and I'm at about 130, 140 frames, which is great. Frame times look really, really solid, very consistent. The interesting thing about the idea of frame times, as in consistency between the display of frames, which is often where this idea of lag comes from for some people. Oops. Probably should have avoided that. Is that I run a G-Sync monitor, and anybody that runs G-Sync or FreeSync doesn't notice inconsistency in frame time anywhere near as much. Simply because that's the whole point of those monitors. It actually smooths all of that out. It changes the frame rate of the monitor, the display refresh rate dynamically to make sure that you're not really noticing that all that much. Just pretty damn cool. Oh god, mistakes were made. I'm not very good at Vanquish. I don't know if you've figured this out yet, but no, I'm really not. Thank god for that bullet time, right? And my laser cannon is overheating. Not great. So I don't really notice that much, but I certainly haven't noticed much consistency here. I ran it briefly with the graph on, and it's like, yeah, this looks great. And Digital Foundry, who are the maestros of this sort of thing, seem to agree with that assessment as well. They said, look, this is the version you've been waiting for. It is just superior in every possible respect, and I think they're right. I don't see any reason to believe otherwise. Let's grab that shotgun, maybe, if we can. Thank you. These guys are not messing around! I don't know if you noticed. The game plays beautifully. Absolutely beautifully. And here's my opinion on mouse and keyboard. I think it's great. I have real problems aiming with an analog stick. I don't like it. It's not precise. Not that it's helping me in any way here. The thing about Vanquish is that, yes, while it's a third-person shooter, you might think, well, obviously keyboard and mouse with mouse aiming is going to be superior. If you play this properly, which I don't because I suck, this is more of a movement-focused game than it is a third-person shooter. Constantly moving and dodging and dipping and diving, sliding between cover to cover, taking full advantage of your wonderful evasion abilities and bullet time. That's mostly what this is about. Sitting in cover actually won't help you all that much. So, in reality, your aiming isn't so much of an issue. You don't have to be that precise. Because for the most part, it's about things like this bullet time and imprecise blaze away, fire from the hip gameplay, relying on dodging and movement. So, as a result, yes, there is an advantage with using the mouse when it comes to aiming. A pretty big one. But it's not as huge as it would be in maybe a game like Gears of War, for instance, or Ghost Recon Wildlands. But keyboard and mouse control for me feels great. You might be thinking, well, what about dodging? It's an issue you've had with quite a few Platinum games when you run keyboard and mouse. Dodging generally better with an analog stick. In this game, not so much. Now, if you remember, Vanquish, in fact, actually used strict directional dodging, not analog dodging. So your dodging was 4 directional rolls. I thought it was actually 8 directional or even analog controlled. It actually turns out not to be the case. I plugged in a controller and no, that's actually not how it ever worked. So in reality, that advantage that you think you might get from an analog stick when it comes to dodging, which we have seen in a number of games, the limitations that digital input actually has versus non-digital input, analog input, don't actually exist in Vanquish. As a direct result, in my opinion, and this is personal preference, but based on the facts and how this game is designed versus other games that may not work that way, Vanquish actually plays better on keyboard and mouse, and it is my absolute intention to continue to play it on keyboard and mouse. I have noticed no issues that would stop me. Again, when I get to the first QTE, we may very well see that I've made a horrible mistake. There's one minor caveat to that. You may have noticed that firing out of cover requires you to hold the button down. It's not a toggle. I didn't notice any option that allowed me to change that. As you can see here. It would be nice to have toggle pop out and shoot, because holding down the button with a mouse doesn't feel quite as good. A little awkward. You can accidentally pop in and out when you don't mean to. As you can see kind of right there. But that is a minor complaint. As you can probably see, the game does look a little elderly, but frankly, once you start to play this damn thing, you should be moving so damn fast that you won't notice. I just suck. Please don't play Vanquish like me. Please don't. I make the game look awful when it comes to its gameplay. Go watch a good player and realize why Vanquish is as respected as it is by both gamers, critics, and game designers. Go and play Vanquish, because it is that damn good, and it is a truly unique third-person shooter. And the PC port is the definitive one, without a shadow of a doubt in my mind. And it plays great with our native inputs. But if you want to play with controller, which is entirely fine, there is nothing wrong with that in any game. If that's what you decide to do, that's up to you. Complete personal preference there. You can do that too. I have no reservations whatsoever about recommending the PC port of Vanquish. I have no reservations whatsoever in saying that Little Stone need to be hired repeatedly to do console ports of games like this. And I have no reservation in saying that for its reduced price tag, considering its age, this is a bargain and something that you really should do yourself a favor and experience. I can't point out any major flaws, and I've tried. I can't poke any real holes in this, and I've tried. What a great port. Not just an average port, not just a serviceable port like Bayonetta or like Nier Automata. Not just, well, I'm glad we got it, but they could have done a hell of a lot better in many areas. It's just, we have the best port, bar none, the definitive port of a classic game, and we should be damn bloody happy about that. It is delicious. Vanquish, ladies and gentlemen, available on PC for $20 or your regional equivalent. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, by all means, do feel free to click the like button. If not, the dislike button is right over there. I'm about to head out to MomoCon for the weekend. Panels available. I'm going to be streaming Q&A, Co-optional Podcast, and Co-optional Lounge live from MomoCon. You'll be able to check it all out. There's a link in the description below this video. I'll be tweeting the times for the live streams. And of course, if you're down in Atlanta, Georgia, come say hi. We would love to see you there at the event. I'll be back late Sunday, and I've got plenty more games to look at. And I'll be playing this over the weekend too. I'll see you next time.